All right, this is the PAF 301 Applied Statistics final presentation. So our overview will be housing expenses significantly impacted due to housing and poverty, impact of housing expenses on the income that taken about 5% of the Arizona population, over 3.1 million more individuals lived in poverty in 2010, 2011. So this is without taking into account of the poverty for workless households or anything, minority ethnic groups, single persons. Renter is a dramatically underestimated value, but we're not going to use that. We're going to look at this as a whole because housing is the most expensive monthly cost. The majority of families that need to address these affordabilities can result substantially in changing the dynamic of the overall statistics. So let's see, affordability has a long-term consequence, and we'll move through that with some of the numbers. So the research, we examined the numbers of people living in poverty within a particular county that affect the county median and housing price. So the research throughout this presentation will be the Hispanic and white geography in connection with the national poverty, as well as it's compared to Maricopa County. I do not live in Arizona. I live in Northern California. So one of the things that we see a very significant high impact in housing, and then also looking at ethnic diversity as well, and how that plays into whether or not housing is affordable and whatnot. And we can see that on the news with throughout California, the housing issues. So our hypothesis development does a relationship between poverty and housing price based on the two racial groups. Does an association exist between these, between poverty and housing prices based on these two racial groups? And our hypothesis will be, HO is going to be the association exists between poverty and housing at the county level. And then the hypothesis will also be there's association existence between poverty and housing prices at the county level. Our second hypothesis, or our null, is going to be does association exist between poverty and housing based on the two racial groups. So through some of the R data, we saw data description. We analyzed the purpose of this was from the 2017 Census Bureau, largest household survey. It's done about 3.5 million addresses a year. Our survey contained key demographics that we use throughout this for funding decisions, tracking shifting demographics, and plan for emergencies as well. Poverty is a explanatory variable, while housing price is an outcome variable in this study. You can see some of the data. Move this here. So some of the data that we did use is our variable data as different demographics throughout the Black, white, Hispanics, etc. Just kind of looking through our data here. This is just our house prices below the poverty population of Hispanic versus white. Below the poverty line versus our house price. Some more viewing of the data. We can look at our 5-point summary. Our mean house price is $140,000. Average data set with a standard deviation of about 257.66. Poverty level has a mean of about 0.047. Standard deviation on that is 0.027. At the same time, home affordability mean is 2.832, standard deviation of 1.137. So the results show that there is a higher variability in high pricing as compared to other variables. Poverty level does have a minor variation in these observations. Some of that number here in our 5-point summary. Just look back to that. Some more data view. Again, looking at the housing prices, below poverty, population of Hispanic versus population of white. Looking through our histograms. So histograms, they illustrate the median value of the housing units with more of a positively skewed. The curve's tail a little bit longer on the right side of the graph in the distributions, but for the most part, the values fall on the left side. That signifies the distribution curve and outliers. And so more to the right and closer to the mean to the left than on the left. Household income is normally distributed, and then there's that bell-shaped curve. So the level of poverty, Hispanic and white population are likewise positively skewed. If we look at after our log transformation, it depends on our variable, and basically it becomes normally distributed after our log transformation. The graph appears as a symmetrical bell-shaped curve, and then it's centered over the mean. Mean and median are equally, so that's equal to the center distribution, and then after transformation, home affordability becomes more normally distributed. That's that. I think moving through our studio data, that values throughout there as well. Is that same graphic there, the after the log transformation +1. Our correlation plot shows that there's a negative relationship between poverty and housing pricing. Correlation between these two variables is -0.080, revealing that strong association. Housing process is also negatively associated with the home affordability. Racial populations are negatively associated with the housing process and reveal strong, you can see that it does reveal that strong association with that. Racial population is also positively associated with the home affordability. So, but it's based off that, it seems to weaken with these other variables. This was our map so on my RStudio, my map didn't pull, so I got to actually go back in there and adjust that code. There does show that census data of the high poverty in the area. So looking kind of at our regression model here, so pulled from RStudio. The first regression model indicates a significant negative association between poverty and housing price through the count of so if that equal to P is 0.01 or less than that, coefficient of poverty revealed as 1% increase the poverty level, yielding a 8.20 units decrease in the housing units. If we increase the poverty level by 10%, it results in 11.29 units decrease in the housing price. We included more, so in this study, I included more explanatory variables in the second model. So the home affordability in the Hispanics with the white population. So this model determined the significant association between poverty, housing, based off the two racial groups. And then the slope and the slope coefficient significantly predicted this housing affordability, according to the p-value being smaller than 5%. So 5% significance level. The Hispanic variable, the p-value was more than 5%. So the R-square value was 0.8127, which is more than the first model. Thus, this was a preferable model for the first one. It revealed approximately 81.27% variation in the housing prices, explained by the mode. So in conclusion, our summary of findings and policy of implications. So affordability has increased its importance in the housing policy with major examples on the poverty level. Still not entirely acknowledged at the and incorporated into the agreed standards, and owing a different perspective on how it should be judged at those thresholds. We discovered that predicted housing prices significantly associated with poverty levels across all racial groups. And then the first model is slightly less good and has a lower model than the second. The second model has higher R-square value, and it is, I felt like it was the best model. So except for Hispanic, all the remaining coefficients significantly predicted the housing prices. Findings may surprise some by restoring the old affordability ratios as a fundamental rule of thumb, while others implying that combining this with residual income ratios subjectively reported the payment concerns would result in more accurate detection of problems. And then nonetheless, the assessment recommended that social policy pay more attention to the linkage between the housing, income, welfare, which had been neglected in the past. Whatever the outcome, the evaluation of the poverty definition by measurements, those interested in those linkages between poverty housing should assess income poverty using those housing costs, and at the very least, as a complement to the housing costs before housing costs. And they should also focus on the living in poverty due to those high housing expenses. And that's our presentation. So going through kind of some of my RStudio work here, our plots, and then we'll send all this in. That's where my map didn't download, so I'll have to re-download that. All right.